Hey, everybody, welcome. This is day number one for the Tools of High Magic for the Workable Witchery Workshop. This is a division of the Academy of Sorcery, a domestic nonprofit community. I'd like to welcome you here to today's class on wands. Let's do this thing. Everybody, I'd like to introduce you to a friend of mine and student and member of our community. This is Mike. Mike, would you like to give a little bit of an introduction about your background with this?
Okay, sure. I have a background in Christianity. I have a background in Judaism. I have a background in necromancy, cartomancy, witchcraft in general. I've studied Christianity. Basically, I was raised in Christianity, but really seriously started studying Christianity way back in 2012 or there around after. Till about 2017 when I went to Torah only. I am a fluent person in Hebrew. That is my second language. My first language is broken English. um, I know how to do Torah codes. I was a pastor, am a pastor, now a priest in the occult. And that's basically it. I follow the writings of King Solomon. I'm a dedicated follower of King Solomon, who followed Hermes Trismegistus and ultimately Thoth. So
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay, so today we're going to cover wands. Now, wands are primarily a ceremonial implement, right? Designed to transmit the holy name of God as a means by which the spirit of the divine can enter into said object and be used to compel your will in a specific direction. Now, where am I getting my information from? That's going to be the Ars Almadel. It is Francis Barrett's The Megas, as well as a few other materials such as the Spells, Ceremonies, and Magic book by Magine Gonzalez Whipper. This book is fantastic. I'm also using, this is the illustrated anthology of Magic, Sorcery, and Alchemy by Gilrot de Givry and translated by Courtney Locke by Causeway Books from the 1970s. It's probably one of the most important books that a budding occultist could be developing. Now, the reason why is because of the history that it provides. Now, in the traditional wand for ceremonial magic, you have, it says Agla, which is the four-letter name of God, which with the upward and downward facing hexagram. So the two triangles, one inverted, one right side up, overlaying each other. Then it's Omega, right? So you've got the Alpha and the Omega. You've got the divine names of the Christian God. And then you've got the space between another version of another hexagram. And then you've got the tetragrammaton, which in this case, you would not spell out the word tetragrammaton. You would put the YHVH for Yahweh, which is the tetragrammaton, right?
Yod-Heh-Vav.
Thank you. And then you would do the symbol of a cross. So it was the 4 points. So that way you've got both the union between the heaven and the earth and the holy name of God imbued within this rod. Now, this doesn't have any terminations on either end. This is just a dowel, right? Made out of oak or hazel that you can use to direct your will. It's about 3 feet long is their application for this. Alphys Levy also comments on the application, the construction of the wand, and it's been brought into popular culture over the last few decades as implements for witchcraft. It never really was, like, you could use a wooden spoon as a wand, right? You could carve your sacred names or what have you into the spoon or carve different shapes of it, but it's something that you use in daily practice to either feed your family or to, you know, stir the cauldron, as it were, because you were feeding your family, you're feeding your friends, you're you know, it's the social pot, it's where spirits come together. And so the use of a spoon, when you cut off the bowl portion of it, becomes the stick. And the stick, when you're, you know, compelling or commanding or beating your children, don't do that, by the way, in the old days, it was an implement of fear as well. And or it becomes the cane by which you get beat with. So certain applications of it in ritual necromancy extend out into the use of it as an authoritarian tool, as the cane by which you will beat the spirit by the holy name of God, in the same way that they would beat a torture prisoner, like they would in the dungeons and such, where they would chain your feet and ankles with the ankle spreader, and then they would beat your feet, right? So that would break the bones in your feet, and it all prevent you from walking and getting away. So the wand becomes an authoritarian tool. So in this application, we don't necessarily need to go that direction with it. We don't have to carve the holy names of God into it. We can call upon the spirit of the wood itself, and different woods yield different properties, different elements to them, in the same way that different herbs in witchcraft do different things. So do the trees. And those act as the different, ancestors to man. And so by the application of these things as an ancestral tool, we can call spirits out through them. Some woods are better for other purposes. Some woods are better than metals. Now, in certain kinds of witchcraft and ceremonial magic, you have the cored out hollow piece of wand, and you've got a piece of iron inside of it in order to be able to create the magnetism between the mineral state of earth and the organic state of earth. So you've got both of those overlaid, right? You've got wands that are made out of copper that are strung with the stones and things like that and inlaid into the copper itself. Those ones are more useful than things that are made out of pewter. I'm not a fan of the Abbey Willow Root wands. I've had a couple of those over the years to test to see how well it conducts the electricity or the energy of magic. And I call it electricity because it's a stimulated current from one point of origin to another. So therefore it's the intelligent energy of those things. And so by doing that, it allows for the cultivation of the direction of will. So it's the compression of your auric field, the chi that flows within you, the yin yang currents that move up and around the earth. And so it's like you can use it to literally manipulate the feng shui currents of fate within a space. So you can use it as like a finger that's extensions of your body in combination with the mineral and the metal and the herbal aspect of life. Now, with the application of the Harry Potter fan base, right? For years before that book came out, I had been tinkering around with an idea of creating wooden wands because I'd been studying the properties of wood. I'm talking about like this is one of the first things I got into when I was not allowed to buy any books on witchcraft, but back when I was trying to study up on what it was. Like the Victorian Grimoire by Patricia Telesco was the first book I got a chance to actually purchase, but Spellcrafts was the first book I actually read. And in it, it had the creation of a wand, and it was a unique idea of stuffing the wand with different ingredients. Now, there is a wonderful wand maker named, the company's called Whirlwood Wands, and this one is made out of wenge, or wenge is how I pronounce it. But that is a wood that allows for the focus of energy, right? But it's not a raw focus of energy. It's fussy. If you're trying to do something with a lower vibration to it, the energy won't flow through accordingly. It will break down, and it will just not work. So if your goals and the spirit of the wood itself don't align, your spells won't flow through the wood. And so that's the thing about wenge, is like you have to be very specific about what you do with this kind of wand. Now, the neat thing about Whirlwood is that they actually went through and did that stuffing capacity. So there's a hole in the bottom of it and a screw.
Nice.
So inside of here, I have my road opener blend, which basically lets me open the road for whatever direction that I'm trying to do with my spell. So if there's anything that's going to stand in the way of my spell, there's one stuffed inside of here that allows me to take that and just like yeet it the fuck out of here. So the gate opens and what have you. So it directs the will accordingly through the implement, right? Now, the way that the implements are shaped take on different applications. Some of them will be a phallic shape, like the ones that have the acorn buds at the tip of it, or because it represents new life, right? And so with a wand, you want to cut it as it's the first grown sprig of the year, right? The first length that grows off of a shoot on the tree. So it's new. It's got potential to grow into a big, thick tree branch. You're cutting it off at its potential. So if it has a bud on it, then you're using the potential life state in order to be able to channel that energy through it. And so if you're using the wands of High Magick that are for the different degrees, one is the flame wand, one is the multicolor wand, one is the ones that have the holy names and the angels carved into them and then inlaid in gold, right? You can use that. But the way that the wand is shaped, so like this one, it has it goes in, right? So with this, energy compresses inwards into the core and projects it into these next spaces here. So there's a mathematics that goes into it. It's the sphere at the end that connects from all the ambient energies around the flat plate, which provides, okay, well, all of the ambient energies are coming out from behind your hand, compressing through the channel here and into the design that's being absorbed by your fingers through the interaction and the pathway through. So when you take those into consideration, the shape of the wand and the way that it's cut and the way that it's cored out and the way that they're attached together really does actually matter. You know, it's not just that it's simply glued to here as a flat surface. It's that there is a cavity inside of here where there is a space of the wand core itself that sits inside the handle. So they fit together and there's no gaps and there's a reduction of artificial materials. The more reduction of artificial material you have, the better off your energies are going to flow through that. So artificial materials being glues, right? So I've put this one together a while ago, back when I still had my lathe, and it's made with the Wenge core as this strip that goes through, but the wood on either side is made out of cedar. So cedar being the ancestor tree, it allows for the compression of the spirits into that more fussy force of the Wenge that runs through the length of it in order to be able to demonstrate this principle of this is an object that can then be inserted into, if it was refined off, into another wand and attached here, right? So that way, what would be allowed for it, it'd be the overlay between these separate woods and the outcome, right? Here's an example of one that was close to being finished. I just never made the handle for it. And again, it replicates the energy that flows through, the energy that comes through and around, and then stacks up into the various points before it's directed out. So that way you can put symbols and sigils in this space here, and it will pull those into the core spirit of the wood, allowing for its eventual outcome and output out of the tip, right? So that depending on what it is you're intending to do with it, you have that opportunity. So like this one's made with bloodwood. It's the king's wood, they call it. And its design is specifically for directing and manifesting your will, regardless of the outcome, or regardless of the things that stand in the way. Like it will blow through those limitations and blocks. Now, Cunningham is fantastic because he says ebony is a wood of power. And so I was able to find a wand made out of ebony. It has golden labradorite for the focus on it. It has dumortierite and it has prehenite on there. And these are for focus and control. So this one allows you to basically open up energy back to a point of origin. So if there is a structure or a struggle that you faced in the past, or that's come from a specific kind of energy that's coming out of the past, and you need to put a stop to that sort of thing, you can focus it through the wand and into your hand as a receiver of it. So it draws energy in while at the same time projecting energy out. So you can create both a yin and yang current with something like this. So it's wrapped in copper. So again, you link from the copper as the correspondence for the energy of the earth, for Venus, also for the physical body and the blood within the physical body. So if you could basically think of copper like the blood of the earth, right, is the same way that the blood in your veins runs through your body, so would copper, right? This one has seraphonite in it and phenocite in the tip. And a phenocite is like the thing that will connect to a laser beam. It is a focus. It is this with the seraphonite and the triple helix. So instead of a double helix, which is like the DNA strand, this one adds a secondary overlay to that. So that way, not only do you have that which is of heaven and that which is of earth and that which is of the lower world, but it's also divided up with the 12 seraphonites. So that way, each of those corresponds to a zone of time. So using this, you can pull from a point of origin. So whereas the other one would project something into the point of origin to change the nature of it, this one can, change the core of a thing. The wood itself is made with lingam vitae, which is according to the legends associated with the wand of Merlin. It is a tree of life. It's also known as ironwood. It's ridiculously hard to carve. And so what you can do is, like, if you're finding that you are with certain metaphysical shops, they have a variety of pre-cut wands. If you buy one of those, you have to recondition it a little bit. You have to take your time and you have to make it your own, right? So that way you get to respond better, right? So it's like, even if it's a mass-produced piece of wood that they cut from a dowel and they shave the dowel down or they put a twist to it or whatever they did to it, you have to figure out a way to condition it your own self, right? And so here's an example of a rosewood one that I purchased, but I put blackthorn here, and the aqua aura quartz here. And so the aura quartz is, in this case, coated with gold, and that's how they make it blue. With the blackthorn, it acts as a blasting rod, and the rosewood connects to the heart's desire. So with a wand like this, it allows you to basically blast your way through with your heart's desire. So that way you get that specific focus of intent, and that way your outcomes with it are potent, but they are heart-centered. They are from your deepest sense of self.
And some mighty nice wands.
Thank you.
I only have one, and it's in the process of being made.
That's one of those things where it takes time and years of cultivation. Like, this one was a gift from one of my partners several years ago on our first Christmas. And he and I are still together. It's just I don't get to see him very often. And it's one of my favorites. It also has a carrying case. So like, it's got the little wand sheath that I can take out during ritual and such.
There you go.
So
a little crooked, but I gotta put leather on it and fix it up.
That is beautiful, man.
If I'm not mistaken, I think it's pine or birch, maybe.
God, that's gorgeous.
I think it's birchwood.
That's fantastic.
It smells like.
That's absolutely fantastic. So the use and the application of it. So when you go through and once it's made, right, you can hold it in your hand, and depending on how close you are to being connected to the rest of the universe, like I always use the rite of transformation as my after spell, because it works in such a more visceral and tangible level. You can still do it if you cultivate the energy between you and your wand. Some consecration methods to hold the energy of your wand out and funnel your energy into the object and cultivate a relationship with the core within it. Now, wands that are mass produced don't really have that, and you have to add that in. So like when I'm using the rosewood, ebony, or the lingam vitae, it really didn't have that core connection to it. And even with the Wenge one, it doesn't have that core connection to it. But this one's a piece of mahogany that was hand carved by the owner of Whirlwind wands. It's a once-off. They never made any more. They don't recreate these. Like, it was a once run. Like, he only charged me for the wood itself, not for his time.
Nice.
So yeah, I mean, he's a great guy. I highly recommend them as a wandsmith, just because their craftsmanship is just outstanding. And they do cultivate the power and the relationship with the wand and the ingredients. And so if you're making tinctures, right? Tinctures and alcohol will split the wood. But here's the but. If you use something like denatured alcohol and dragon's blood, when the denatured alcohol is evaporated, the resin in the dragon's blood remains, and it hardens and it forms a shellac over the edge or over the material.
Right.
So it acts as a protectorate. What you can also use too is the insect-based shellac of like the old world, where instead of a polyurethane and petroleum products as a finishing to it, you can use insect vomit essentially as the outer casing on your wand. And that actually works really good to transmit the energy through, because it was from a living object. It was from a living being, right? And so the more living elements that you can use in cultivation of your wand as a finishing thing, that would just be something that I would recommend absolutely for thoughts to consider when you're finishing it out. Once you've got the core of the wand awakened, like you hold it in your hand, and you don't have to do this in a special ceremony or what have you, because the way that particular spell works is it opens it up inside the conduit, and the conduit in this case being the wand. And so you would take the spirit and the name of the spirit that you get, and then you would open the seal of the gate of the earth, and you would let it blend with the energy of the earth, and then you would do the seal of the air, and then you would do the seal of the fire, and then the seal of the water. Because even if it's wood, right, inside of that spirit principle within it, the Akashic core, right, you have the potential of allowing for that energy to grow in relation. So that wand becomes then an extension of the earth of air, the earth of fire, the earth of water, and the earth of earth, right? And so even though it's a tree, it's a physical object and an emanation of the earth, the spirit inside it cultivates a sylph, an air spirit, one of those that, as the sun above and the earth below cultivates the life in between, right? As oxygen, as the principles of carbon go in, out comes oxygen, out comes airy things, out comes those principles and qualities. So your wand becomes a manufacturing house for sylphs, or a sylph specifically, that will run the spirit of that particular piece of the tree, right? And so you can use it to contact the air elementals. And so therefore, in my work, I use wands as an emanation of the system of the air. So that way, by connecting them to the air and the sylphs that are being sent out from it, or that's, so what that looks like in ritual process, when you're actually using these things, you don't have to hold a death grip on your piece of wood, right? Don't death grip your stick.
Don't do it.
Gain your sensitivities. No, you can basically just visualize that the spirit that exists within it can sit on the tip. And so when you direct it at a thing, right, you're projecting your will to carry the intent. You're holding it in your hand to guide you with that thing. So the energy of your spellcraft and the energy of your wand become singular in unison. They become aligned. They become...
Let me break that down for the people that are actually listening to you.
Yeah.
Your intent. A lot of it has to do with your intent. As everybody knows, I teach hermeneutics. So it's the law of vibration and frequency. It's a very important part, frequency.
Yeah.
When you have frequency and vibration that works together, that intent is coming through and producing what you need. It's the law of, it's natural law. It's things put in place that we humans can't alter, is basically what natural law is. So when you start looking at things like the Fibonacci sequence and I think it's called the Melderoth.
Oh,
yeah. You understand that everything has a sequence and everything repeats. So Think about that when you use your magic. Think about what he's saying to you. Use the law of vibration and frequency, polarity. Use them in sequence with your magic. And that's where you're gonna get your magic on.
Right. And if you've got your wand imbued with the holy names of God, you're intoning the names of God in your spellcraft to summon up your spirits, which would be the intangible nature or the non-visible nature of the thing, right? The pre-Socratic thought is the essence of a thing is when that thing is removed, it no longer is the thing, right?
You give it a name.
You give it a name. You can define it by that. And so essences in my work are the same as spirits, but essences are the core of the spirit, which is the inexorable behavior of that thing, right? And so by giving it a name of a spirit, you're giving it behavior, you're giving it condition, you're giving it an expression. So when you go and you name your wand, it becomes an extension of that expression. It carries through that same vibration and resonance. So when you've got your energy flowing through the chi of the wand that you've cultivated that relationship with, through yourself, through the words that you're speaking, through the thoughts that you're thinking, everything compresses down into one, and you've got that wand becomes the flat plane across which your will is projected. So if you have the quantum thought going, I know this is where the math comes in, and for those of you that are just beginning in this, it's something to be aware of, but it's not something to get hung up on. When you are directing your will out from your body, right, it's going to come across a flat plane of this is the pattern, this is the path of release. So about 3 feet up off the ground is the astral plane, is where people have felt the difference between the principles of the earth plane that we stand on, right? And then there's the astral plane, which is the projected plane where the spirits exist. It's about waist high for most people. And then there's the plane of heaven, which is above our heads, right? And we bring that down. And so that we exist in this pillar state between the 3 planes. And so depending on which position your wand is in when you're directing your will, it basically is like a sheet of energy that you're projecting from your body around your auric field into the auric field of the earth, or into the column of energy that you've created in your ritual space as a result of applying things like the cone of power, which we'll talk about later this week, things in the ritual circle that we'll talk about later this week, things within the pentacle that we'll talk about later this week. And so that as we go through and we develop the relationship with these ingredients, these tools, right, they become just as much of an extension of their own characteristics. Like, what is the wand going to do? What is its proclivities? What does it like to do and behave in? What kind of spells do you like to do with it? What kind of spirits does it like to interact with? If you do this right, it develops an intelligence and it will let you know.
Not only that, I do want to bring up an interesting fact, because many people might not know this, but this all stems back to many, many ages ago, even in Hebrew, in Judaism, especially Kabbalah. That's where the Jewish Kabbalah priests would actually say abracadabra, meaning I will create what I speak. It goes, I'm telling you guys, it goes back. They won't tell you that, but being a scholar, it's exactly what it means. I will create what I speak, abracadabra.
Yep.
It's your intent.
And this is exactly why it's fantastic to have you involved in this conversation, Mike, is because you do bring that historical scholarship to it. You do bring that to the table. And if I'm inaccurate in my descriptions of these energy systems, I appreciate, your feedback and making sure that the information that's delivered, not just to you, but to others that watch this video, that they get the opportunity to really go in depth with this, right? So that way they can nerd out over, okay, well, this is the wand that I'm going to use for this spell, or this is the one that I'm going to use for that spell, right? And that the wand will change over the different degrees. And so if you're going through Crowley's Liber Abba, he shows different applications of it. Or if you're using the Methods of the Golden Dawn by Israel Regardie, then inside of that, it talks about the characteristics of the different wands and the reason why you would do different things like that.
Right.
And In this case, I'm specifically focusing on the wand as an intermediary conduit, which means it's the balancing point between the earth and heaven, right? It has a life of its own that's independent from human life. The trees will grow, the trees will die based on environmental conditions, light conditions, based on the weather, based on natural circumstance and situations, which humans don't have any involvement with. And so this is where I call it a fey spirit. This is where I call it a nature spirit, because it is an independent behavior, an independent quality, which you then, as the magician, as the human, have to learn how to interact with. So it's not necessarily going to be friendly unless you go and do the rituals of awakening for it, right? Unless you use it in the way that it wants to be used. If you use it outside of context or outside of your ritual circle to project anger, if it's not a spirit of anger, then you're violating the basic premise of it. And so therefore it breaks the conditions of the spirit inside of it, and it becomes corrupted, and then it becomes unusable.
Right. You're breaking the law and spirit of what that, you're breaking the law of what that spirit is meant for. Like there's specific laws for them energies.
Right.
So if you don't use them for what they are to be meant for, you're going to have what they call chaos. Look that up. That's a very, very important word.
Yes. And cracking the pandemonium, unless it's a wand that's specifically made for that, which the ebony wand technically can handle, you don't have to worry about that so much. But whereas if you're trying to do chaos magic with a Wenge wand, it's not going to work as well, because Wenge basically doesn't put up with that bullshit.
Right.
Ebony will.
Got some leniency.
And so this is where knowing what your outcomes are going to be, like if you're trying to do something that's beneficial, even if it's kind of fucked up, you can use the lingam vitae. Whereas rosewood, you can only do beneficial. Right. And so this is why I have a litany of wands, is because each one is for a specific kind of magic that I work. And not all wands can be used at the same time, you know, because there's different spirits that exist within them. And when you start applying minerals to them where the spirits can dwell within, the minerals also have a nature to them, an essence with them. And so those have to be cultivated. Those have to be created, consecrated, and unified with the object of the wood. So all of your ingredients matter when it comes to how the wands are constructed, how the wands are applied, so that the deeper that you can go into these kinds of creations with them, the easier it becomes to work with as an extension of both an intelligence that exists outside of yourself and in relation to the natural world. So it acts as a conduit between those things where humans don't apply. It can be your emissary. You can direct it to go do the thing you need it to. You can call it by its name. So by its name, it creates by your intent. And therefore you can use the wand as a base tool for your projection. And so going back to using the holy names of God, you're conditioning a stick, which is a piece of creation, which is a piece of God, imbuing it with the force of divinity. So that way, when you wield it as the priest, as the individual capable of holding that licentia, you have with you that authority to call on God, and by God's actions, direct that spirit towards its effect, or to call up a spirit, or to threaten a spirit, or to basically using it as the holy mighty beady club of the divine, right? So you can, you know, you can do very weird shit.
Right.
Essentially, depending on what your uses are. And if you're looking at it from a Wicca perspective or a witchcraft perspective, you have to cultivate the relationship of the wand. You have to cultivate it to the element. You have to be able to, on a windy day, take it outside and let the air flow around it. You have to suffumigate it in various incenses, depending on what it is that you're doing, in order to feed the spirit within it, right? And this goes again to the cultivation of that as an object of power. So it's not just a piece of wood, it becomes a holy object. And by making it a holy object, you're then giving it the authority to extend out beyond itself in the same way that your body can extend out beyond itself in forms of astral projection, in forms of planar projection, so that you can take something that has a physical body here on this planet and you can send it into the planes and the dimensions where it does not have a body. And so therefore a wand can be made to interact in the same way that a human can interact with the other world. And so its spirit can take on physical shape. It can take on non-physical shape, right? So you're overlaying the astral quality, the spiritual quality, the heavenly quality, the infernal qualities to a piece of wood, which functions as a golem, if you will, a created being.
There it is for the third time. In the last 8 hours, I've heard golem. Like, I was on a sister's live stream yesterday. And I was like, she was talking about mythologies and God and everything. And I was like, I can create something out of the earth too. It's called a golem. Like, really, what's so special about that, you know? And then this morning when I woke up, I think it was Mark Dice said something about a golem. And I'm like, I just let it go. I'm like, and now you bring up a golem.
A golem.
3 times.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
I think they're trying to tell me something.
Make a golem, Mike. Make a golem.
I think they're trying to tell me something.
You know, make a golem. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, I covered how to make the necromantic clay puppet, right?
It's in my grimoire too.
Oh, I love those. Yep. I love making that stuff. But when you're cultivating, a relationship with something that is made of nature, right? It is already formed of the earth. It's just an extension of the earth that's had its spirit cut, right? Now, there's a whole bunch of mythologies around how do you harvest the wand. Like, I have a hazel wand that was cut in a single stroke by a witch, and it was made for me. It was on Midsummer that they cut the branch, right, in order to be able to cultivate the solar energies, right? That one I'm not showing on camera at all. But at one end of it, they have the crystal point, and it has a feather, so that way the spirit can be directed with the feather, with the crystal point and the feather on one side. And then on the back end, it has a black cord and it has a gold cord coming off of it, so that there is a return of energy out of the back end of it. And this was made in the traditional witchcraft way. And this was made traditionally for me. When I touched it, I asked for its name, and it's the only one that I didn't have to cultivate my damn self, because it was made in the right way. It already had the spirit imbued in it. The spirit of the tree was asked, will you be the vessel? Will you give part of yourself to become a spirit of magic, to be of service to others, right? And so when the single stroke, you slice it off. The reason why the single stroke is because you want to make it as painless for the tree and the spirit within that as possible, right? And so if you're sitting there with a saw trying to hack away at this thing, you know, that's damaging the energy conduits that flow through the fibers and everything. You want it to be as graceful as you can. And so to be able to do that, you know, you put a little bit of time into how these things are collected, right? And so it's not about the mass production. Once-offs. Like, everything that I use regularly is handmade. And I know the guy that made it, or I can find the person that made it, or I've remade it from commercial quality. Like these ones here, they are hand cut. Yes, absolutely. They're hand carved, but they're done so in bulk by people that are not conditioned in the woods, right? Not conditioning the spirit of the energy within it. So you have to be the thing that goes and conditions that energy. You have to be the one that associates, well, this is what was, this is what needs to be. And so you have to overlay that energy back into it. You have to put it back into its dead matter. And this is where the necromancy comes back in. You have to restore to it a form of spiritual life, even if its physical life has been cut off. And that separation of it isn't conducive to the continuation of it as an object, right? Like as an object of power anyway, in the same way that my hazel wand is an entity of its own, these ones act more of an energy conduit, a non-living form of the energy, right? Whereas that one is a very specific living current. So they can take on different shapes depending on how you use them. Right. And so, like, if I was to take human remains, like the ribs and stuff that they sell through osteological supplies that have been bleached and don't have any of the pneumia, as they call it, from the 1800s, right? The life spirit within it. How do you recondition that? Well, you could put the bones inside the casing of your handle, and then you could take it to a cemetery, stick one end of it in the cemetery, and then call up the blessings of the earth. So that way, as the land receives, so that the tree receives. And so by the tree receiving, a spirit is born within it. There's your spell, right? Simple necromantic wand, right? Or in this case, you can use the wand as a projective. So in this case, I've got a fibula, right? So this is the arm bone, right? And so by using this, I'm using the spirit's arm to direct my intent. I'm using this to knock on the graves in order to raise the spirit. I'm using this as a means of power to cultivate the relationship between this world and the other world. But this has been, again, this is one of those things where it is no longer living. It's been cultivated and purified and bleached, and it has no organic substance left to it whatsoever other than the form. So what do they sell these for? Well, you study these for medical purposes so that you can understand, well, this is where the muscles came together. This is where the overlay of the two bones came. This is how old they were when they died, and so on and so forth, right? But these are also great for absorbing energies. These are, you can put holy symbols, you can burn the symbols into the wood, you can use leather to wrap on it or what have you, or you can leave it plain. But using solid pieces of bone are separate than if you were to use a piece of wood. And so
you also infuse a gem in the top of that and use crystal magic.
Exactly. And then you're dealing with the living and the non-living principles of the spirit world, right? Whereas the gems and the trees are easy because you don't have a human spirit to contend with. Depending on where you source your bone material from, it becomes different. So like in High Magick or in Chinese folk magic, when they're going to the cemeteries and over there, they can actually dig out the bones and they can dig them up and they can use those from the graves and things like that. That's where you get into corpse magic. That's where you get into a deeper form of necromancy, where you condition and you petition the spirit of the dead from which those bones came, and you ask them to serve you as an ally, as a familiar, as an intermediary between this world and the underworld, right? For those souls that have not crossed on. So it becomes an intelligence instead of a
presence.
Exactly. Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
So, I mean, when it comes to dealing with things that will direct your will, the wand is not just a prop by Hollywood because it's the easiest thing and it's a flashy, like, oh, look, I'm a wizard, I'm waving this shit around arbitrarily. You can do it in specific patterns. So you make sigils or symbols or glyphs in the air. Like in Taoist magic, you've got the hand seals that you can do, and then you've got the symbols that you can cut in the air with the sword, which in this case becomes an extension of the wand or the extension of your will. We'll get into that also at a later time this week. So one class will be on swords. Yay, blades. Now, the application of this is very simple in your magic. You're creating a spirit ally. You're creating one that's made out of a spirit of the wood that you're bringing into your home, into your ritual practice, and you're making sacred. So it's a pact between you and the tree. It's a pact between you and the behavior of that tree. So make sure that as you go through and you do this sort of thing, your relationship to this ingredient, to this spirit of the thing, becomes something that you're going to honor, and you're going to honor for the lifetime of your practice. And so that way, when your practice ends, the destruction of your wand, if you're cremated, it can be cremated, or you should have a transfer ceremony so that way the spirit of the wand can then be introduced to the spirit of your disciple so that they can transfer the power to, you can transfer it into another vessel, or if something was to happen and your wand was to break, you could take the spirit from it and join it with another vessel, or you can just free it and you can cultivate the relationship with a new wand. There are ways of destruction that honor and release the spirit within it instead of just outright destroying it, right? And depending on the presence of the wand in the same kind of capacity, whereas if anything happened to that hazel one, the spirit would be free, but it would still interact with me. It would still interact because I know its name, right? And so I'd still be able to call it up out of its body, even though it doesn't have one. Or then I can imbue it into a different body that's suitable for that nature. So it just depends on that relationship and that service that spirit does in unification with us. So I think I've covered everything on wands in the cultivation, in the animation, in the consecration, associations, and destruction of them, as well as use. Am I missing anything, Mike?
No.
All right, then. You have any questions we can cover over real quick in case anybody watching this might have questions? What might they be thinking?
Use it responsibly.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when you're dealing with you're dealing with intelligences that are outside of the scope of human behavior, it responds differently to different insults, in different resonances with your energy. So you might understand how it works in one condition, but if you're using it outside of its place, what are the other conditions that it's going to be subject to? And therefore, what are the subjects it's going to have on the environment? What changes will it produce on its own in the environment because you've created something that resonates at a very specific frequency, at a very specific rate? And if you're trying to apply that at a different, it's like basically taking a tuning fork that's made for, say, for example, the tone for C, right? But you're taking it and you're cutting into the tuning fork to change its frequency in order to make it into like a D sharp or a C sharp, instead of making it for C sharp or D specifically. And that's the same thing as taking a wand out of its place or using it in a spell that it doesn't belong in, right? And using a staff versus using a wand, like this was a staff that a friend of mine made and he carried around as his cane. And then for a while I was using it as my cane, and he's got a piece of selenite in the bottom of it. So it acts as a projector as well as a support. So this is actually an entity, right? And the fun thing is that when he was going to search for this, I had him draw it out and stick it underneath his bed before he found his wand, and it was the same shape. Only originally this was about 6 feet tall. It wouldn't fit into his car, so he cut the bottom of it off and he made it into a cane instead of into a staff. And this is from one of the white oak trees that they were cutting down. I was going to make this into a stang. I made a short stang out of it and kept it as a staff. And I'm going to, over the next year, while this thing continues to dry out, I'll sand it down and then start putting different symbols and stuff into it. But this will be a nice, walking cane, walking stick. It takes time to cultivate these relationships. So it's not something that when you're making a wand, you should do it in one setting. Like you can, but it's over a duration, right? Like give it some time, let it earn its name. It's your ritual tools is going to be something that you keep with you for a lifetime, right? Just because you have a want and a desire to have the full regalia all at once, it takes time. Don't rush your regalia. Don't rush you'll find the perfect chalice. You'll find the perfect pentacle. You'll find the perfect wand. You'll find the perfect sword that you want to use for your magic. You'll get several over the lifetime of your practice. But I know how exciting it is to get your very first one. To have your very first one done, ready, made, all of it the right way, and the right way meaning it's intelligent. It's an energy that connects to you. It's a behavior that corresponds with the thing that you desire. It's that next level of opportunity that allows you to take where you're at and grow with something, because you're incorporating it into your practice. So you're making it as your friend, right? You're inviting it into your life. And so even if you don't have a wand and you're looking for one, ideally you make it yourself, or you'll go to a wandsmith and make it, and you'll experiment with the different types of woods, right? I've got several wands. You can have more than one, guys. You really can. However, I will say this: if you have a wand that channels a specific spirit, like the names of God, you should only have one of those. You should have other wands that do other things, right? Don't replicate the same one. Don't have 13 different wands that correspond to the same name of God. Have 13 different wands that correspond to 13 different gods that you can lay out and put those energies in sequence, and you can use those as part of your grid design. Like I use blackthorn rods. They're not carved. They're just raw blackthorn that's been cut. And I'll use those and I'll position those to make the arrangements of the glyphs on top of the image magic that I use. And then I'll put the crystals at the corresponding places, so that by the blackthorn and the spirit of that energy that just blows through obstacles, right? It's creating a circuit of energy. And so you can lay those out. And so even if it's not worked and it just looks like a stick, you still use it for ritual purposes. You still, from that stick, it is for sacred purposes, right? And this is where the use of things like palos come in, right? There's the palos that you burn, and then there's the palos that you use to anchor the spirits, to act as a doorway between this world and the other one. So depending on what it is, you can put the palo wood down and you can bring those spirits forth from it, right? And so they incorporate into your practices. They become the extension of the thing that you're doing. If you're shaving the sticks down, you're asking the spirit of the stick to enter into the shavings. And so that way it becomes a manifold approach. That way many spirits, many aspects of that wood, that physical body, get incorporated into your spellcraft. So like using sticks and trees in your practice is foundational. Like it's one of the first things that you should be doing. And then as a kid, go outside. I found a wand. It's a stick. Correct. You did. But the maturation of that relationship, like what it's done, what it's been through, how it's gone through life with you, that's just as important. So for all of those that have stayed with me for this class, I appreciate it. Mike, I appreciate you very much. I will see you guys tomorrow for the next lesson in the series. We'll have to see what that class will be. Cups or swords, Mike? Cups or swords?
Let's save the swords and go with cups.
We'll do cups tomorrow then. So we'll do our element. We're doing our elements, right? So today is the element of air. Tomorrow will be the element of water. Okay. So I will see you guys for the class tomorrow. Stay safe. And remember, don't be evil.